in Lwów, eastern Poland. And you see Lwów, the black spot. Lwów was the third biggest town in Poland. It was, and it still is, a very beautiful town. There were 3 communities living in Lwów. The Polish Catholic community, Ukrainian community, also Christians, but slightly different from the Catholics, and the Jewish community. There were over 120,000 Jews. Unfortunately, most of them perished. I am one of the very few, less than perhaps 0.5%, who survived. So this is my story and the story of my family and the people of Lwów. And this is my father, that's the way they dressed men, very similar to the way men dress now. And this is a photo which I like very much. It's my mother holding my brother's hand, and I'm holding on to her to leave our flat, to take a minimum of things. And we were given a room in a small house. They were preparing the ghetto. Very soon when we arrived, my parents dug a hole under the wardrobe. And when we heard the German soldiers arrive, we hid in the hole, but there was only room for my mother, my brother, and myself. My father and my grandmother hid in the loft. My cousin Nina, who was also in this house with her parents and her brother, her father and her brother hid in the loft as well. When they left, very soon my mother told me that they had shot my father. Nina's father and her brother, I believe they were taken away and sent to a concentration camp. There was in Lwów a concentration camp, and next to Lwów there is a very bad one. They would automatically be gassed, called Sobibor. My aunt Róża told my mother to hide, and the same to Nina's mother, who was her sister as well. And we hid this time in a sort of shed in the kennels, which was in the courtyard of that house. We were there, and I remember holding on to my mother, and I was just frightened. My only emotion during the war was being all the time frightened. My mother was frightened. I remember she was trembling. I saw the soldiers, the German soldiers, arriving. I could see them through the wooden slats of this shed. But I was so frightened that I didn't look at their faces. I just looked at the jack boots. They always had, in my memory, they always had well-polished, beautiful boots. They didn't find us. And when they left, we came out. The last time I saw my mother, I went down the cellar, and the conditions were absolutely awful. There was water running down the walls. There were rats around. My mother was lying on the bed, this iron bed. She was covered, I remember noticing, covered with sores. And she didn't look at me. she looked sort of in the space somewhere. She didn't say anything. My mother, who had always been a very loving and very affectionate mother, didn't say anything, and I couldn't understand why she didn't say anything. I got so upset by this and so frightened that I ran out. And I didn't even hug her. And you know, even now I feel very bad about it. Because when you see your mother ill, you want to comfort her, don't you? Within a day or two, my Uncle Zelig told me that she had died. Maybe she was already dead. The conditions in the ghetto, maybe you've read about it, were absolutely awful. There was so much poverty. It was very dangerous after the war in Poland to say that you were Jewish, because there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and in fact some Jews were still killed even after the war. They let me go. My aunt took me to Krakow. She put me to a children's home for Jewish children who had survived, and I met Nina, my cousin. But the people in that village were very anti-Semitic, and they would throw stones on the house. So the people in charge of that home decided to leave Poland. It was illegal to leave Poland after the war. They managed to get false papers, false passports, and one day we left. We went to France. And here is the bus on which we traveled. Where you see the cross, that's me. When we arrived in Paris, my aunt and Nina, my aunt said to us, to Nina and myself, if we wanted to stay with her, because the other people, they were all going to Israel, but my aunt wanted to stay in Paris, and we said we want to stay with her. So she put me in a children's home, and Nina as well, where there were all the French children who had survived, because as you know, France too was occupied by the Germans. I went to school, my education is French, my language is French. And when I was about 24, I decided to go to England to improve my English. I met an Englishman and I got married. I have now 2 sons and 2 grandsons, and I love them very much. I try to teach my sons to be tolerant, not to persecute people because they have a different religion or a different color of the skin. Thank you very much.